All right, guys, welcome back to another video. So this year so far has been just abysmal in terms of layoffs and games being canceled and just lots of bad things happening within the industry. People are looking at this as some sort of gaming industry crash, and I don't really see it that way. I see it more of there was a huge expansion over the pandemic, and now the industry is kind of going back to normal, as well as games are just getting more expensive, and there's not an expansion in the people that have the money to go out and buy all of these games. So these companies have to find different ways to get their products into the hands of consumers and then just fight off all of the other competition that is continuously coming in. And in an interview yesterday with Polygon, Phil Spencer talked about the layoffs and Xbox and his kind of thoughts on the Xbox business. So some interesting stuff here I do want to go over, but we'll start off here with him talking about the layoffs and what he thinks about the changing industry and how that has affected Xbox. First of all, he talks about some context in terms of what the gaming industry used to be. It used to be a lot simpler to decide if you're going to develop this game and kind of project how much money that game was going to make. He says here, or the article says here, Spencer talked about how things used to work when budgeting and greenlighting a video game. The Microsoft exec has been producing games for long enough that he can remember when the financials were relatively straightforward. A publisher could set a sales goal of, let's say, 800,000 units, set an earn-out goal of how much money they wanted to make, and then set the price of the game, which was for a few generations $59.99. And then from there, a video game publisher and or studio could set a budget. And now, obviously, things have completely changed. All the different styles of games, you have games of service, multiplayer, all that stuff has come in and totally changed dynamics and the economics of developing a video game. It says here, however, the financial calculus has changed. In 2024, most games are sold across multiple storefronts, often steeply discounted mere weeks after release. I mean, you can look at Ubisoft as an example that their games come out and then literally 2 weeks later, you're getting it like almost at half price. Is kind of crazy. I think I even saw The Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown on sale the other day in Canadian dollars, which is what I buy my games in, at $30, which it's a phenomenal game. So everyone should go check that out. It's probably like $20 in the United States. And it continues here, or included as part of a subscription service on launch day. Plus, the games themselves take many years to create with the help of hundreds, if not thousands, of team members, sometimes spread across the world. All of this adds up and as Spencer says, it can cost $300 million to build a video game. And we saw those numbers directly from the Insomniac leaks that it cost them over $300 million to develop Spider-Man, which is astronomical. And it makes it very hard to make your money back, or at least make enough money off of that game to have good margins if you are locking games just to a singular device with a finite amount of players that will be able to access the device, which is why we are seeing these pivots in where people can actually access and play games, even on the PlayStation side, with a lot of their games now available on PC. Now, Spencer explains how this cost forces three substantial problems: one for all big budget games, one unique to console exclusives, and one that spans the entire industry. So he gives a breakdown here. But before we get into that, people always say that it's just PR speak and there isn't really very much information here. He's just saying this just to kind of look past and get people to believe what he is spewing. But I have to say, he does get into some good information here, and he does give great insight on the industry itself. And he's absolutely straightforward in terms of what Xbox is. It's a business. They're there to make money. It's not something that they're just doing for fun, just to pander to the Xbox fanboys. They're there to make money. And he says this here: we're a business. I've said it over and over. I don't get any luxury of not having to run a profitable, growing business inside of Microsoft. And we are that today. But just across the industry, you mentioned it. And in sitting here at GDC, I reflect on friends of mine in the industry that have been displaced and lost their jobs, and how just I don't want this industry to be a place where people can't, with confidence, build a career. So that's why I keep pivoting back to, how does this industry get back to growth? But to your question, for us as Xbox or any of the teams that are out there, it is really an outcome of an industry that's not growing. Something that we touched on, I believe, in my video this morning. The console market isn't growing. It is stagnated. And that's why you're seeing these companies realize they have to reach more gamers one way or another, whether that is putting their games on the competing console whether that is putting their games on PC or whether that is developing things like mobile games, just any way to reach a market that has potential for growth. He says it can grow and it will grow again, but you see this time right now and the implications have human impact, and we should all reflect on that and think about it. So it's a business. They make decisions because they're trying to make as much money as possible, and they have to adjust to the changing economics of the gaming industry. But back to the 3 problems he outlines, this part's pretty interesting. So for the big budget games, he says, the cost really reduces the risk that publishers are willing to take. Where previous games needed to sell a few 100,000 units to justify their cost, new games may need to sell many millions of units. If you're a publisher, you know that's a pretty big number in a world that already has lots of video games coming. And that is another problem that I'm definitely seeing right now is you just look at 2024, and even 2023 was insane. The sheer amount of games that are being dropped all the time. You got the indies, you got the double A's, and then you have all these big triple A's that are being dropped on us. Nobody has that much time to be able to play all of these games. Well, maybe I shouldn't say nobody, but most people don't have all that time to play some of these games. And most of the people that don't have that time to play those games are the people with the money that will be going out and actually buying video games, have that disposable income, and they really have to select and choose which one they want to play. And if you have 3 or 4 major games coming out, there is going to be some losers in that category, especially if they are kind of similar in the genres that they are. So that is something that I think we will start seeing changes. I feel like we're going to get back to a point where it's less releases. These developers, these publishers are going to think we got to put out some smaller games, and we have to have more time between our games and make sure that we have some sort of other ongoing revenue stream, whether that's a multiplayer or games as a service, while we are developing that major big AAA banger that will release and that we can almost guarantee is going to do very well. So it's a very changing time. I think that the industry needs to kind of pull back on the amount of releases as a way to offset this risk, because if they don't, we're going to just see a lot more of the same things over and over again, the same games over and over again. The Last of Us remake 3, 4, 5 times, how many times they're going to remake it. He continues here and says, how are you going to establish this thing? Am I willing to take the red on new IP, on a new kind of game, when the earn-out risk is that high? I think it impinges on the creativity of this industry, which I don't love. Creativity is like the cornerstone of what we should be about in gaming. And that's exactly like what I just said too. Like, it's unless they come up with something here that can almost guarantee that that new creative game is going to make them some money, creativity is going to go down the drain, and we're just going to see a lot of the same stuff over and over and over again. Now, his second point here, which I believe he talks here about the console exclusives, is this cost is particularly prohibitive for exclusives that can only reach so many players. And of course, I mean, we've seen that play out this generation, not only from Xbox, but from PlayStation as well. The only company here that has just been great at keeping their same strategy and console exclusivity has been Nintendo, but it's like a completely different model because their games don't cost nearly as much to make. And to be honest, they have a much broader target of audience, from grandmas and grandpas to middle-aged people to kids, whereas there are a lot of first-party games from PlayStation and from Xbox that really only target a specific segment of the population. It says here, as Spencer explains in our conversation about the perils of exclusivity and walled garden consoles, these games need to make additional money to justify the console maker subsidizing the costs of the console. As Spencer explained, the case for exclusivity gets pressured as the cost of the game goes up. And that's why I've been saying this for years now. We will start to see PlayStation put their games day and date on PC. We're seeing a great example from Helldivers 2, how that paid dividends for them, even though that's not from their first party, but they did fund that as, I guess, a second party game. But if they're going to be spending $300 million to develop first party PlayStation games, they're not going to be able to sustain this on a consistent basis by keeping those games only on the PS5. And then finally, the next part, I believe, is comment that spans the entire industry. It says, according to Spencer, the console market has not grown in the past year, which is not a good sign at all. If you're Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, even if you're selling your consoles right now, if it's not growing past it was maybe last generation or whatever, that's something that's going to have to change going forward, especially as the rising costs of these games continue to go up. He says, though, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch consoles continue to sell, Spencer notes that many console gamers are simply upgrading, or to put it another way, they're not new to the market and won't contribute to growth. And without new customers, everybody else's customer is your success state. And that's exactly why they obviously put those 4 games on the PlayStation, trying to get those PlayStation customers over to the Xbox ecosystem. It's not just about trying to make, I think, every dollar off that game on the PlayStation platform. I think some of it definitely tries to go into capturing that customer to bring them over to the Xbox ecosystem. He says you can't succeed unless you draw in customers from other publishers and other platforms. And because you're not finding new customers with the games that you are building, everybody's kind of fighting over the same pie. And this really just makes me think about the whole ABK thing, getting that huge mobile section where they can go out and try to grow in another part outside of the console so that they can make that money, make all that revenue, and then continue to support the AAA, the consoles, and their core Xbox fans. So I thought that was pretty interesting, his 3 points and his insight on the gaming industry. I just kind of wanted to talk about that because he's pretty open there. He was pretty open on what he thinks. He's pretty open about Xbox being a business, and there's some good points in this overall interview. But I'm going to end the video there, guys. I would love to know all your thoughts on this. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Or do you agree with Phil Spencer? Do you disagree with Phil Spencer? Let me know in the comments below. If you did enjoy this video, hit that thumbs up. If you are new here, hit that subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next video.